I want to go to what I think is the most important give and take yesterday in the testimony. I didn't listen to the entire testimony. I read a lot of the transcript last night and yesterday afternoon. But Representative Robert Adderholt of Alabama asked a question, and I've got it verbatim per the transcript. Is the Justice Department investigating how it came to be that your agency used a salacious and unverified dossier as a predicate for a FISA order on a U.S. citizen? In other words, are we going to look into how the hell this happened? A fake, a phony piece of opposition research paid for by the Clinton campaign gets a FISA warrant. Is your office looking into that? Here's the most compelling statement of the day as far as I'm concerned, and this is why the Trump crowd can be a little giddy. Barr responded, the Office of the Inspector General has a pending investigation of the FISA process in the Russian investigation, and I expect that will be complete in probably May or June. I'm told. So hopefully we'll have some answers from Inspector General Horowitz on the issue of the FISA warrants. Here's where it gets interesting to me, and I'm reading between the tea leaves here. I am reviewing the conduct of the investigation and trying to get my arms around all the aspects of the counterintelligence investigation that was conducted during the summer of 2016. I haven't seen the referrals yet from Congressman Nunes, but obviously, here we go. If there's a predicate for an investigation, it'll be conducted. So he has put on the table the political reality of investigating the investigators. That's a very coy way. That's a very lawyer-like way of saying, I am seriously considering whether or not, and here we go with the radio show talk, to go after the people that went after President Trump. I mean, that's the way Limbaugh would interpret it. That's the way Beck will interpret it. That's the way Hannity will interpret it. That's the way Fox News will interpret it. That's the way I interpret it. I don't think there's any other interpretation. And I got to believe that a lot of careerists, a lot of deep staters in Washington had an oh crap moment yesterday when Barr put that on the table, because at the end of the day, the FISA warrant was about Carter Page, who never faced any criminality. That he was never a victim of a crime. He never perpetrated a crime. He was kind of a wannabe and a hanger-on. Believe it or not, politics has a lot of those kinds of people who want to be close to the administration, who want to seem important to the administration, who overstate their access and influence on the administration. I've often said politics is Hollywood for crazy people, and Carter Page probably had that bent gene, but he was never indicted nor found guilty of any sort of crime. So in essence, if the criminal investigation, or excuse me, if the FISA warrant was issued and predicated on whether Carter Page was acting on Trump's behalf and colluding or obstructing with Russia, then I want to know why. I want to know what sort of compelling evidence you had. And once again, the Inspector General report will come in, and Barr has put on the table that indeed he is interested in whether or not the investigators need to be investigated. And to me, this would be the most compelling process that we've seen since Watergate. Really? I don't have any question. You're going to find or not that a cadre of unelected bureaucrats, and I find it so interesting.
And a lot of us believe that's the case anyway.
You have a sneaky suspicion, and I do as well. I mean, you've always been told, don't trust the man. But the man's been untouchable. I remember callers calling in a long time ago saying, the man always wins. The man never loses. Well, I could argue the man lost in this Trump incident. And I could argue not only did the man lose in going after somebody to basically, there was an organized coup amongst the deep staters in trying to remove this duly elected president. We've had that conversation, and that's why I don't want to be the drumbeat. That's why I don't want to be redundant and just continuing to repeat that from 6 to 7, from 7 to 8, from 8 to 9. There's a strategy employed by the other guys, and they do a great job of it. I find it boring after a while. But I do think this is very sensitive. I think it's very topical. I think it's very timely. And I think it's pretty clear to me that there is an interest amongst this AG and his subordinates to take a close look at what exactly happened that allowed this FISA warrant to be issued, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And was there substantial enough information to allow for it to happen? Or were we on a witch hunt? I think if we opened that door, once again, we opened the door on Trump. We didn't find collusion. We didn't find obstruction of justice, but we found Paul Manafort being a piece of human feces. We found Papadopoulos being a wannabe and saying some outlandish and crazy things. We found Gates and some things he had done as Manafort's partner. What do we find out if indeed we open an investigation into Comey, Clapper, Brennan, and some of the other unelected bureaucrats who consider themselves and have appointed themselves masters of our political universe? What happens to those people if we indeed get our foot into the door? It's a little bit like the NCAA investigating your football program. You just don't want that. You don't want people like that sniffing around your program. You believe you're okay. You don't believe you bought anybody a car. You don't believe you gave anybody a bag of cash. You're not sure you didn't, but you don't think you did. But you know damn well you didn't do everything right. You know there's some problems there if indeed they take a closer look, because that's the nature of the business. Well, the nature of American politics is rough and tumble. And what Manafort was found guilty of was rough and tumbleness. And what Papadopoulos was guilty of were some of the rough and tumbleness of politics. Doesn't bother me, because that's the way that world works. It's a dog-eat-dog, self-serving, I'm getting what I can, whatever you do is your business. That's kind of the way the construct of that world is. I'm not saying it needs to be that way, but it is. And I don't think it's just the Manaforts of the world or just the Papadopoulos of the world. I think Comey and Clapper and Brennan are as guilty of rough and tumble as anybody ever has been. They just got the mantra of working for the man and the polite nature of wearing the black suit or the blue suit and having a dignified existence in a corner office somewhere on the 8th floor of a building in Washington. That gives you some cover in regards to that. Manafort's a cowboy. He's a renegade. He's out of control. He's doing all these crazy things. I think if we begin to look, you'll find how unscrupulous some of these beyond reproach individuals are. So yeah, I think, and I want to go back, I want to read it. It's in small print here in the transcript, but I want to read it again because I think the most interesting conversation, the most interesting question he answered was when he said, I haven't seen the referrals yet from Congressman Nunes, but obviously if there's a predicate for an investigation, it will indeed be conducted. And if you're Manafort, or excuse me, if you're a Brennan, if you're Clapper, if you're anybody, the previous administration's security team or intelligence gathering team, that there's got to be a tightening of the old certain area of the body.
Well, especially if they know, and they do know, whether they did something they shouldn't have
done. Sure, they do know. Well, I think you and I know they did something they shouldn't have done, and they never thought they'd be found out. And if you think about it, Rev, the day that Jeff Sessions recused himself of the responsibility to oversee the investigation was the day you put a careerist in charge of the investigation, Rod Rosenstein. And Rosenstein's not going to handle this thing, or was not going to handle this thing any differently than a careerist from Washington would have handled it. And that's the problem I've got here with Rosenstein. If Rosenstein has to pledge allegiance to Donald Trump or the system, Rod Rosenstein's going to pledge allegiance to the system. His loyalties are always going to be in line with self-preservation. Presidents come and go. I need that paycheck and pension to be there when I need it. So I think the question, and I don't think Barr would ever say this about Rosenstein, but I think in his heart of hearts, Barr believes that Rosenstein was indeed loyal to the system, the allowance of the deep staters to do whatever it was they needed to do to rid ourselves of this indecent president. And I think at the end of the day, that's going to be the narrative. History will argue whether Trump was a good president or not. History will show clearly that this was an invalid investigation. This was an investigation that should have never seen the light of day. Now, the modern media is not going to debate that, but I'm talking about historians. I'm talking about fair-minded political historians who try to honestly account for what happened, why it happened, and what the outcome was. I mean, CNN's continuing to beat the drum. They don't have Russia collusion, so they got tax returns now. I mean, they're a hack. I mean, that's why they've averaged about 720,000 viewers, per night on weekdays. I mean, that's pitiful. I mean, they may be the most trusted name in news because nobody's watching it to trust or not trust. But I mean, to have less than 1 million viewers on every single primetime show in your network, on a network as established as CNN, shows me clearly the public has basically rebuked the modus operandi of CNN. But I still believe when Barr gives that answer, and I'm hopeful. I mean, I am so desperately hopeful that he sticks to his guns when he gets some of the information from Nunes, that he begins to explore the inconsistencies in testimony, some of the comments, some of the text, some of the innuendo we have found over the long haul. And I think he says something was up here. And I think what happens is what you and I have always wanted to happen, and that is to investigate the investigators. And I think we're heading there. I really believe sometime late summer, early fall, there will be the appointing of a special counsel or some other sort of person to head this investigation. And I think we're going to have a review, basically not a postmortem. I mean, we're having that. We're having a postmortem about the collusion or the obstruction. I'm not talking about a postmortem. I'm not talking about let's go back and score what they did. I'm talking about opening the door and find out whether they should have done it or not, and what was the impetus that led down them believing that they had the authority and credibility to investigate whether this president colluded with Russia and obstructed justice or not.
And then, of course, if laws were broken, there may be consequences.
There could definitely be some consequences. Where's Manafort today? Where's Papadopoulos today? Where's Gates today? As I said, there was a tightening of the butt cheeks amongst many careerists in our nation's capital.